It's only the Conservative Party in the middle which is stuck with the difficulty of having to defend its own record on Brexit. Brexit in particular creates enemies for the Conservative Party on both sides. Those who, even among the Conservative voters, were never enthusiastic about leaving the European Union, and those who are the clientele of reform who remain enthusiastic about Brexit, but think that it hasn't been pursued with sufficient zeal.
Hello, I'm John Stevens. I'm the chair of the Federal Trust, and I'm talking once again to Brendan Donnelly, the director of the Federal Trust, about developments in the United Kingdom related to Brexit. Brendan, Brexit seems to be continuing its chaotic impact upon the British party landscape. The latest development being the defection of Lee Anderson to Reform from the Conservative Party. Is Reform simply UKIP remade, or is it rather more than that?
It's slightly different from UKIP because UKIP was about getting the United Kingdom out of the European Union, and that's happened. And it's not merely happened, it's proved an obvious disappointment, a failure, many people would say. And this leaves the party, the Reform Party, which in many ways is the successor of UKIP, with two challenges. One of which is to find a reason, a narrative as to why Brexit is obviously failing. And second, perhaps to elaborate one or two policies or attitudes which go beyond Brexit, which are not incompatible with Brexit, but may broaden the appeal of the party.
What are these wider policies?
Well, they're essentially about migration, leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, and participating in what are called culture wars. All of these three things are natural concomitants of Brexit. The narrative about why Brexit has failed is to say that those who've been charged with carrying it out weren't sufficiently zealous and weren't sufficiently enthusiastic about it. That's an attractive analysis because it can never be disproved. As far as migration and immigration is concerned, it's a paradoxical position because it's become perfectly clear that the British economy needs a lot of migratory workers, and these were provided in many ways much more economically efficiently and conveniently by being in the European Union. So that's why questions of migrants coming to seek refugee status over the Channel, supposedly illegal migration, is at the center of what Reform talk about. They don't talk about the real question, which is, of course, relating to legal migration. As far as
how is the Conservative Party reacting to this?
Conservative Party is really paralyzed. It doesn't know how to react. Because it knows that there are many of its members, many of its supporters in the newspapers who agree with the Reform attitude. But on the other hand, they know that there are dangers to what they call their southern base, to the southeast of England, constituencies around London, who are put off by what they regard as an unattractive drifting towards the Reform position, not just on migration, but also on cultural issues. One of the other aspects of the Reform agenda is to participate very vigorously in what's called cultural wars. Lee Anderson, in particular, is an enthusiastic cultural warrior on his television appearances.
But what are these cultural wars precisely?
Well, it's very vaguely defined, of course. It's the idea that somehow the United Kingdom has been taken over by a metropolitan, over-liberal elite who've lost touch with the real sense of common values and decency of the United Kingdom populace. It's an irony that Reform claims to be in touch with the British people and then does so moderately in by-elections and any other electoral exercise it's participated in.
And this failure of Brexit, I mean, that doesn't seem to be damaging the Reform message, or does it?
Well,
Does it make it its threat actually rather exaggerated at the moment?
that may be so, but the attraction of the reform message is that it puts the Conservative Party before a very difficult quandary. They can either continue pretending, which on the whole they do, that Brexit is working, or they can admit that Brexit isn't working, and whose fault is it? It can only be theirs. And they don't seem to know what to do in choosing between those two extremes. Funnily enough, the Labour Party seems to agree with an element of the reform message that Brexit could be made to work better. It's only the Conservative Party in the middle which is stuck with the difficulty of having to defend its own record on Brexit. Brexit in particular creates enemies for the Conservative Party on both sides. Those who, even among the Conservative voters, were never enthusiastic about leaving the European Union, and those who are the clientele of reform who remain enthusiastic about Brexit, but think that it hasn't been pursued with sufficient zeal.
But how effective do you think the reform challenge is likely to be if they get more defections from the Conservative Party and therefore more MPs? I mean, are they going to become a credible challenge to the Conservatives? And are they going to be able to do a great deal of damage in the forthcoming general election?
I think they're two separate questions. I don't myself think that there will be many MPs who peel off to join reform. I think that Anderson was an exception. I think that most of them will conclude that on balance, their future political career is more likely to be sustained by remaining within the Conservative Party rather than going to reform. They remember that reform have got a rather moderate record in the elections they've stood in so far, and on the equally UKIP flattered to deceive as far as electoral questions were concerned. So I don't think there'll be many MPs going to reform. On the other hand, I think that if reform do stand in the number of seats they're threatening to stand in, many of which obviously are Conservative, they may well change the Conservative result from being a bad one to being a calamitous one. I think they are in a position to do damage to the Conservative Party.
But part of this pressure of defections to reform is about whether or not to remove Sunak from the leadership of the Conservative Party ahead of a general election, isn't
it? There is dissatisfaction with Sunak, but all the reports that I seem to read suggest that there's no coalition or coalescence around someone to replace him. The meeting last night between himself and the leader of the 22 committee seems to have been an indecisive one. There don't seem to be the 50 plus letters of censure going in that would trigger a leadership election. It may happen in May after the local elections that they'll be so catastrophic that the Conservative Party will do what I think it was Churchill said it only does in a crisis, which is panic. And there might be panic then. But I think it will happen in a messy and confused way. I don't think that there is any coherent plot against him at the moment. But I think he's aware of the weakness of his position, and it's very well exemplified by the business of Frank Hester, where remarks are attributed to him which could only be described as appallingly racist. And it took 24 hours for Sunak to say that publicly, as he should have said at the beginning, because he knew that he was likely to offend some potential reform voters. And that is something which he thinks at his peril.
Well, the Hester case was obviously very extreme and very blatant. But behind this is the broader issue of Islamist extremism, the accusation that this is a major danger to the British state, and the pressures associated with that. And obviously the pressures which are also on the Labour Party following the election of George Galloway. I mean, is there a danger that the Conservatives will be seeking in response to reform to weaponize this Islamicist accusation and this theme, this divisive theme, and to encourage a generally more divisive politics?
Well, I think divisive politics have been all the Conservative Party have had over the past 5 years since 2019. As far as weaponizing anti-Islamic feeling is concerned, I think there are limits to that tactic because public opinion on the Palestinian issue, the broad Palestinian issue, has changed in this country over the past 20 years. Islamophobia is something that may appeal to a certain fringe of the British electorate, but I don't think it's something which is going to be saleable by the Conservative Party to the middle range of British political opinion.
One reason why some conservatives are relaxed about reform is that they feel that it is producing a new pole for protest that could distract from another party, which has traditionally been very much one of protest, namely the Liberal Democrats. And one of the ironies of the Liberal Democrat position, particularly in the light of their strength in places like the southwest of England, was that whilst they were, this is before the referendum, the most pro-European party in the UK, probably, they nevertheless relied tremendously, particularly in the West Country, on people who in European elections voted for Brexit. And a lot of their vote was actually a protest one rather than one for their own political agenda, centrist political agenda. And if reform continues to rise in the opinion polls, and it's now ahead of the Liberal Democrats in many polls, that this might actually blunt the Liberal Democrat attack in the blue wall, which is obviously another part of the mix going into the next general election.
That may be true in some constituencies, but I doubt very much whether there'll be enough of such constituencies to undermine what is going to be the major result of the next general election, which will be a substantial Labour majority. What will happen afterwards, after the election, I think is another interesting question. I can't see that the Conservative Party and Reform will survive after the election as two separate parties. I think it's inevitable that there will be a merger between the two, and I can imagine that Nigel Farage might be the leader of this merged party. It may be that one of the reasons why he's holding back from committing himself fully to the general election campaign is that he wants to be able to emerge after the election as some sort of a unifying figure. It's a mind-expanding thought that Nigel Farage should be a unifying figure, but stranger things have happened in politics.
But one concern of that strategy, I mean, that's certainly one that is widely identified with Farage at the moment, is that if he waits until after the election, the Conservative defeat may be so substantial that what he inherits via some merger with Reform will be so far behind in parliamentary terms that its ability to get back into government in one term will be impossible.
Yes, that might be a calculation, but another part of the calculation would be that a wrecked and dispirited, demoralized Conservative Party can more easily be taken over. As part of the background to his calculations must be the volatility of British politics. Everybody said, not everybody, but many commentators said in 2019 that there was no chance, even if the Labour Party did well in the years after 2019, of its being able to win an election, being able to win a majority in 2023 or 2024. Well, now all the speculation is only about what is going to be the magnitude of the majority. Those hesitations 2 or 3 years ago are completely gone. We live in a very volatile political situation, and Farage and those who think like him may conclude that a totally shattered and demoralized Conservative Party can easily be taken over, and then, as it rebuilds the Conservative Party, perhaps building on the failures of the Labour Party in government, the two-party system, the first past the post system, will work to their advantage.
Well, the concomitant of that, of course, is that the Labour Party, if it wins the election, will be inheriting an extremely difficult economic and geopolitical legacy, far more difficult than any facing an incoming government for far more than a generation, indeed. And that therefore its chances of failing in office are actually very high. But perhaps we should conclude on wondering if you...
Can I just make a point about that? That
Yeah.
it may well face difficulties, economic difficulties, but that does give it an opportunity to revisit the European issue, both in economic and political terms. I expect, obviously I hope, and perhaps the hope is father to the thought, but I suspect that halfway in through the Labour Party's government from 2024, 2025, they will attempt to develop a European narrative, which is both economic and political. The political narrative perhaps is even more attractive than the economic narrative. It's that the United Kingdom used to be a rather normal, rather placid, rather happy European country. Since Brexit, society and politics have been torn apart. If the return to the European Union could be presented, as I think it could easily be, by Starmer and the Labour Party, as a return to normality, a return to European normality, then I think that's something that might well be attractive to many voters.
If, as you believe, reform effectively takes over the Conservative Party after the next general election, where would this leave the what's left of moderate conservatism, old-style conservatism, pro-European conservatism, indeed? I mean, is that now completely destroyed? Would it seek to rebuild the Liberal Democrats in a more conservative direction, or would it be reliant on the moves towards a more European policy by the Labour Party and government along the lines that you've just laid out?
All of the above is the answer to that. The incapacity of what at one stage was a substantial wing of the Conservative Party, the pro-European wing of the Conservative Party, if you like, to act in a cohesive and coherent fashion has been one of the reasons why the Eurosceptics, the Europhobes, found it so easy to take over the party. I doubt very much whether there will be any coherent response from the fragmented and diminished group of pro-European conservatives you're talking about. It's possible that they might try to found some sort of regional party, perhaps a southeastern party or a London and southeastern party. But I'm not holding my breath on that. I think the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats will both benefit from this fragmentation of the Conservative Party. Some Conservatives will just drop out of politics, and there won't be a cohesive response from them.
But this, of course, is a fundamental problem, because it's very difficult to see us rejoining the EU unless there is broad support for that right across the political spectrum. If it is simply a centre-left agenda, that makes the task much more difficult.
Well, I was talking more about people who've been politically active up till now. It doesn't follow at all that centrist, centre-right opinion in the country couldn't move in a more pro-European direction. It's just that I'm doubting whether the remnants of the Conservative Party will be able to lead them in that direction.
But will this require a new party creation, or will it be the Liberal Democrats that become the new Conservatives in this sense?
I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows. But I find it difficult to believe that in 5 years' time, when centre-right opinion within the country has moved decisively, as it's already moving, but in 5 years' time it might move more decisively in a pro-European direction, that won't find political expression. But what that political expression will be, I don't think anybody knows at the moment.
Well, watch this space. This is obviously very central to our discussions and work. Brendan, many thanks for that. I hope you enjoyed this discussion, and we'll follow our other ones on the same topic.
Thank you very much.